Hello, YouTube. I'm Vince White. I'm an employment attorney, and today we're talking about an article in the venerable New York Times entitled "The Double Whammy That Is Slowing New York City's Job Growth." And I will provide the link in the doobie-doo down below so you can see it. It is an interesting article by Matthew Haig and Patrick McGeehan, and essentially their core premise, and I'll read it. It's why bury the lead. New York City's unemployment rate is currently at 9.4%, which is about double the national rate. Now, when you're looking at unemployment rates, whatever number the government gives you, you need to look at how they calculated it. Because generally, when the government is giving you an unemployment rate, it is not the actual unemployment rate. It is probably usually going to be a rate of people claiming benefits, unemployment benefits, right? And that is not all that useful a metric because people run out. They run out of unemployment benefits and they have to stop claiming. They also often don't qualify for one reason or another, right? Like if you're disabled, you may not be able to apply for unemployment. If you switch states, you may not be able to apply for unemployment, right? There's a lot of things, there's a lot of reasons that can make it impossible or even illegal for you to apply for unemployment benefits and receive them. So you always have to look at how the government is calculating the unemployment rate because generally it's a lie and generally the rate is much higher than the rate they're giving you. So here, when they say that New York City's rate is 9.4%, that's very high. It's extraordinarily high because we know that's probably not the real number. We know that number is probably artificially low, right? And so they go on, they get into this. Essentially, they're saying nationwide, the unemployment rate has plummeted to 4.2%. Again, false, but fine. The way they're calculating it, fine. And I know this is not the way that Matthew Haig and Patrick McGeehan are calculating it. This is the official number that's given out, and they get funny with how it's calculated. So they're saying, listen, nationwide, things are doing great. New York City, not doing as great. Very concerning, right? And essentially they're making the argument that no other city in the States was hit as hard as New York City. I would argue that was not true in terms of the pandemic, right? The pandemic did not hit New York City all that hard. It hit New York City early, and with some fierceness, but it wasn't. We built the hospital. We brought the hospital ships in. We built all these facilities, and we were turning the Javits Center into a giant hospital facility with ICU beds, and we were stealing, gosh, I forgot the name, the breath machines to help people breathe, from different facilities all over the state, and as far as we could grab them, and they never really used the hospital ship. They never really used the Javits Center. Like most of these facilities were never used. We never really had. Listen, there was dead bodies, right? Like we had a problem. There was a lot of dead people. A lot of the older people, a lot of the homeless people, a lot of the people in the shelters, a lot of people who overweight or high blood pressure or had heart problems. Like there was a lot of people who died. I'm not underplaying COVID in New York City. It was sad. It was tragic. I don't think you can say it hit us all that much harder than it hit other cities, though. I think that's a bit of a bait and switch. Like, oh, it was COVID that did this to us. No, COVID was pretty much the same at different times nationwide. If you had the population density approaching New York City, you probably had the same experience with COVID at some point. The same severity, the same repercussions from COVID. It had more to do with population density than it had to do with anything else, right? So they go on. Essentially, they're saying New York City is in its worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. Maybe that could be true. I don't know the numbers on that, and I would not second guess these reporters. Um, they point out that the unemployment rate in New York peaked in June of 2020 when it was at 20%. 20%. And that's the government provided 20%, I believe, not the actual rate of unemployment, right? So when you're out in the street and you're looking around, you're walking around, 1 out of every 5 of those people is unemployed. But wait, there's more. Remember, almost nobody who lives in New York City is from New York City. Uh, Let me put it another way. Almost nobody who lives in Manhattan is from New York City, right? So a lot of times when people lose their jobs in New York City, they leave because they can't afford to live in this incredibly expensive city, right? So they go live with family or they go live somewhere else cheaper. Or they cross the river to Jersey to live cheaper. There's a whole bunch of places to go, right? Even the Long Islanders, they flee back to Long Island to get back to the safety of not cheap, but not as expensive living quarters and cost of living and stuff like that. So even that 20% unemployment, even if you believe the government's rate, even then it's artificially low because most of the people, many of the people who were without jobs had just left New York City, right? So also an issue. But even okay, let's just assume take the government rate for what it is and play with that. June 2020, 20% of the population of New York City is on unemployment. It means you go out, you walk around, 1 out of every 5 people you meet on the street unemployed. It's a weird vibe. It was weird to be there. I was there a little bit. And it was, no, I was still there quite a bit in 2020. And it was weird. Yeah, New York City is a weird place now. It's people argue it's getting better, but like you go look at office space and 90% of the floor is empty. It's weird. The whole thing's weird. So they go on. The tourists stop coming. So all these people who worked in tourist related industries were kind of out of a job. 8%, only 8% of the office workers of New York City were back working 5 days a week in the office as of November of this year. Yeah, that I believe. That makes sense, and it's also kind of funny. Like landlords in New York City they'll tell you like, "Oh no, everybody's back. Everybody's back." It's like, dude, I can see your floor, right? Oh, so you had 3 tenants before the pandemic, and everybody's back? How do you stay in business? That's weird. No, nonsense. So I mean, like, listen, these people are not coming back, right? Um, Everybody left. I left. I occasionally pop into New York City if I have to see a client or something like that, but like everybody left. It's not a well-run city. Um, the mayor that they voted in time and time again, de Blasio, was not an intelligent human being. I think he was only elected because he was an old white guy. Like I can't even imagine. There's nothing redeeming about that person. So going on through the article, I'm ranting here. So they're saying they lost about $100,000 jobs in the city's restaurants, bars, and hotels, 60,000 more in retail, performing arts, and entertainment, and it's not going well. They seem to keep saying like, oh, their vaccine mandate is helping. It obviously isn't. Omicron doesn't much care about your vaccine. And now Omicron is, of course, coming. And we have Eric Adams, who nobody really knows what to expect from, faced with a job of trying to reinvigorate New York City. Now, when I say this is a joke, purely a joke, I heard Eric Adams is a vegan. I don't need to tell you, if he's a vegan, we're in trouble, right? But listen, could he be amazing? Could he be the next greatest mayor since Bloomberg? Maybe. It's possible. I mean, listen, um, it's possible. I was never a fan of Rudy Giuliani. I never thought he did that great a job. I thought he was super racist. And his later antics in his political career and his legal career kind of speak for themselves. Maybe he lost his mind. Maybe he was always a bit of an idiot. I don't know. But, you know, let's hope Eric Adams is better. Let's hope. Let's hope for New York City. So going on, they kind of touch on the recessions in 2000 and 2008 and how Wall Street shrank and the city lost tens of thousands of high-paying finance jobs. And they argue the losses on Wall Street have been minimal this time and that tax collections are helping hold the city up and keep the city going. Now, this is, again, a complete fiction. Many private equity jobs have exited New York City during the pandemic. They had already begun exiting New York City before the pandemic, and they continued to do so during the pandemic. But even more importantly, the companies that still do business in New York City, their employees are moving to remote work for obvious reasons, including Omicron's coming, New York City is not that pleasant to go to these days, and the taxes in New York City are insane. Now, New York City thinks it can still tax those people, and it's suing many people, as is New York State. Now, you've got a variety of other states saying, nope, you can't do that. They don't work there anymore. You can't sue them. So you've got these legal battles between states like, I believe, New Hampshire, where I reside now, is fighting with New York and Massachusetts on the same topic. So New York City is kind of making believe that it can tax these people, but has a really hard time winning those cases in court. And I happen to know quite a few people in the taxation authority in New York City who are very clear on the fact that no, they're not going to collect that money. Those people are not coming back. And they don't really have legitimate legal arguments as to why they would collect money from people who have moved to remote work. All those people really have to do is not spend too much time in the city and just switch their base of operations to a different facility. And guess what? Private equity firms and Wall Street are super down to help you do that because they know, one, they need your talent because it's hard to hire good talent these days. And two, why would they collude against you to make you pay more in taxes? If they can lower your taxes by helping you out, it's like they bumped your compensation without actually having to pay you anymore, right? So this is all nonsense. New York City is in a major slump. They continue to have this fractured messaging. We don't know if we're 4 billion in the hole or 28 billion in the hole. And now I guess they told these reporters, we're not in the hole at all. We're actually doing great. No, pure fiction. Pure and absolute fiction. Let's go on here. About 10% of the population of New York City were receiving benefits when their unemployment benefits expired. Now, many of those people did not return to work, did not find new jobs. That is a concerning factor, right? So those people dropped off how I believe they're calculating the rate of unemployment in this article. They fell off those numbers, so they wouldn't count towards the unemployment rate, but they're no longer receiving benefits. So how are they surviving? If they're still in New York City, how are they paying rent? How are they paying for food? How are they getting around on the subway? Right? This is all very concerning. And, you know, they get into the tourism industry here. There's not much we can say about that. It's kind of beyond the scope of, well, it's employment related. I feel bad for these people who work in the tourist industry, but, you know, they may need to move, right? They may need to go somewhere else with better job prospects. Now, of course, a lot of the retailers in New York City are shutting down facilities. Some of the demonstrations that went on during the summer, there was a lot of looting. Looting is becoming prevalent again. It's not like San Francisco, you know, where people are just walking in and taking, you know, exactly whatever it is, like $999 worth of merchandise, so they can't be charged. It's nothing like that. Not there yet, at least, and I don't think Eric Adams would let it get there. It's pretty clear Eric Adams is a pro-police mayor, I actually worry primarily how he'll treat minorities, although he himself is a minority. It does seem like he is perhaps tough on certain communities in spite of that. So we'll see. It's a concern. And I don't know what he's going to do. I don't know who he is in his heart of hearts. I'm hoping for the best. So they're going on and on and on. And they kind of close out the article with this story about this bartender who worked at a hotel, the Plaza Atheni in Manhattan, for about 35 years when he was fired in March of 2020. And he's pulled $100,000 out of his retirement plan to survive. And, you know, it's tragic. It really is tragic. But that's kind of New York City. I mean, that's the problem. It's run so poorly, you kind of have to watch for the writing on the wall. And there has to be a time when you say, oh, okay, this is bad enough now that I got to leave. The party's over. The party might be back in 5 years, but the party's over here in New York City. And we have to go somewhere sane and well governed to be safe for a while. And we can look at coming back later, but not right now. Certainly, I think this is going to continue to worsen, continue to be an issue in New York City. Listen, could they turn it around? Yeah, of course. Of course. I don't currently see them doing anything to turn it around. It seems like they're really doubling down on a lot of the policies that drove them to where they are today. But we'll find out. And if you're in New York City, I hope you're staying safe. If you're not, if you got out of New York City, I applaud your forethought. I hope that the transition went smooth. And I hope to see you in New York City someday in the future. We'll grab lunch, right? Because, hey, the food was good. Most of the restaurants are gone. Many of the restaurants are gone. But the food is still pretty good if you're allowed to go to a restaurant, that is. Stay safe out there, everybody. Watch out for that Omicron. And like and subscribe. Helps me to help more people just like you.